The city was a restless beast at night, its streets humming with the low growl of engines and the distant wail of sirens. Keanu stood on the corner of 12th and Vine, a solitary figure beneath the flickering street lamp, his breath visible in the cool March air. He wasn't looking for trouble, not tonight. He'd just finished a long day on set, the kind that left his muscles aching and his mind buzzing with lines he'd already half forgotten. All he wanted was a quiet walk home, a chance to let the world fade into the background. The city had other plans. That's when he saw it, a shadow moving too fast, too jagged, against the rhythm of the night. A man stumbled out of an alley, his coat torn, his face a mask of panic. His eyes darted wildly, catching Keanu's for a split second before two figures, broad-shouldered, clad in dark hoodies, grabbed him by the arms and yanked him toward an unmarked bus idling at the curb. The bus was old, its paint chipped and windows tinted black, the kind of vehicle that didn't belong in anyone's good intentions. The man's muffled cry cut through the silence, then vanished as the door hissed shut. Keanu's got twisted. He could still see the man's face, brown eyes, wide with terror, a silent plea etched into every line. He could walk away. He should walk away. This wasn't his fight, wasn't his story, but that look hooked into him, a barb he couldn't shake. Trouble had a way of finding him, or maybe he had a way of finding it. Either way, he wasn't built to ignore it. He pulled his hood up, slipped his hands into his pockets, and started toward the bus. The vehicle lurched forward, tires squealing as it turned the corner. Keanu didn't hesitate. He broke into a jog, keeping to the shadows, his boots silent against the pavement. The bus wasn't fast. It couldn't be, not with that rattling engine, but it had a head start. He cut through an alley, leaping over a pile of trash bags, the stink of rot hitting his nose as he landed. He emerged just in time to see the bus pull into a derelict lot behind a shuttered warehouse. The place was a graveyard of rusted shipping containers and broken glass, the kind of spot the city forgot, or pretended to. He crouched behind a stack of crates, his breath steadying as he watched the bus doors open. The two men from before stepped out, dragging the panicked man between them. A third figure emerged, a woman, tall and sharp-edged, her voice barking orders in a language Keanu didn't recognize. More people spilled from the bus, men, women, a few kids, all with the same hollow look in their eyes. Their clothes were mismatched, threadbare jackets, a child in slippers too big for her feet, their hands clutching plastic bags or nothing at all. Immigrants, Keanu realized. People who'd crossed borders chasing a promise, only to land in something darker. He'd seen that look before, in places he'd rather forget. The woman gestured toward the warehouse, and the group shuffled inside, prodded by the men like cattle. Keanu's jaw tightened. He'd heard whispers of operations like this, human trafficking rings masquerading as transport services, preying on the desperate. They'd promise safe passage, jobs, a new life, then squeeze every dime from their victims before dumping them into worse fates. He couldn't fight them, not with fists. There were too many, and he wasn't that guy, not tonight. But he could outthink them. He had to. He pulled out his phone, switched it to silent, and started recording. The grainy footage caught the bus, the warehouse, the woman's face as she lit a cigarette and barked another order. Her features were stark under the sodium lights, high cheekbones, a scar cutting through her left eyebrow. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He needed more. Names, proof, something concrete to unravel this mess. Slipping closer, he stayed low, his breath shallow. The warehouse door was ajar, and he could hear voices inside. The woman's clipped tones, the low grumble of her lackeys, and the soft, frightened murmurs of passengers. Keanu edged along the wall, peering through a grimy window. Inside, the group sat on the floor, surrounded by crates and flickering fluorescent lights. A young boy clung to his mother's leg, his face buried in her skirt. An older man with a gray beard stared at the ground, his hands trembling. The woman paced, a clipboard in hand, while one of the men counted cash from a duffel bag. 50 heads, she said, her accent thick, Eastern European maybe. We move them tomorrow. The underground's got buyers lined up. The underground. Keanu's stomach twisted. He'd heard that name before. Rumors of a syndicate running everything from drugs to people, a shadow network no one could pin down. It was bigger than he'd thought. He needed a plan. Charging in wasn't an option. He'd be outnumbered and outgunned. calling the cops might work, but these people could scatter before anyone arrived, and the passengers would be the ones to suffer, deported, or worse, handed back to the Syndicate. No, he had to dismantle this from the inside, quietly, like pulling a thread until the whole thing unraveled. He scanned the lot and spotted a stack of fuel cans near the bus, leftovers from some abandoned job, maybe. An idea sparked. He crept over, unscrewing the caps and tipping cans just enough to let the gasoline pool beneath the bus's rear tires. Not enough to blow it up, just enough to ground it. He struck a match, dropped it, and darted back as the flames licked up, small but insistent. The acrid smell of burning rubber hit the air, and shouts erupted from the warehouse. The woman burst out, her face twisted in fury. "What the hell is this?" she snapped, rounding on her men. "Put it out, now." They scrambled, grabbing buckets and cursing, while Keanu slipped around to the warehouse's back door. It was unguarded. Everyone's attention was on the fire. He eased inside, his pulse hammering. The passengers looked up, startled, as he stepped into the light. "I'm here to help," he whispered, raising his hands. "Stay quiet. We're getting out." A few nodded, eyes wide with hope. Others just stared, too broken to trust. He didn't blame them. Trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. A man in a faded red cap stepped forward, his voice low. "You're not police. Who are you?" His English was halting, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. "Someone who's been where you are," Keanu said, meeting his gaze. "It wasn't a lie, not entirely. We don't have time. Follow me." The man hesitated, then nodded, murmuring to the others in Spanish. They started to move, a ripple of cautious hope spreading through the group. Keanu scanned the room, spotting a stack of papers on a crate, manifests, names, destinations. He grabbed them, stuffing them into his jacket, then moved to the front door. It was locked from the outside, but the mechanism was old, rusted. He wedged a piece of rebar from the floor into the latch and pried, until it gave with a groan. "Move!" he hissed, waving the group forward. They surged as one, a quiet tide of desperation, the man in the red cap helping an elderly woman with a limp. Outside, the fire had spread to the bus's undercarriage, and the Syndicate crew was too busy shouting to notice the exodus. Keanu led the group down a side street, sticking to the shadows, until they reached the gas station a few blocks away. The clock inside barely glanced up from his phone as Keanu ushered everyone in. "Call 911, Keanu told him, sliding a 20 across the counter. "Tell them it's a trafficking bust. Warehouse on Vine. They'll find the bus." The clock blinked, then nodded, fumbling for the phone. Keanu turned to the man in the red cap. "What's your name?" "Carlos," he said. "You're crazy, man. Brave, but crazy." Keanu gave a half smile. "You're safe now. Tell the police everything. They can't hurt you anymore." Carlos translated for the group, and a woman with a toddler clinging to her leg grabbed Keanu's hand, tears streaking her face. "Thank you," she whispered. He squeezed her hand gently, then slipped out before the siren started. Back on the street, he pulled out the papers he'd taken. Names, dates, drop-off points, a roadmap to the Underground's operation. He paused under a streetlight, scanning the list. One name jumped out, Elena Markov, the woman with the scar. If he could find her, he could find the heart of this thing. But not tonight. He'd hand the papers over anonymously, drop them at a precinct, let the authorities connect the dots. The fire would slow the Syndicate down, give the passengers a head start to freedom. 2 days later, Keanu sat in a diner, nursing a black coffee as a TV above the counter blared the news. Breaking story. A major human trafficking ring dismantled after an anonymous tip led police to a warehouse on Vine Street. 50 undocumented immigrants rescued, several arrests made. The screen flashed Elena Markov's face, handcuffed, glaring. Keanu exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing. Carlos appeared next, speaking to a reporter. "A man saved us. Don't know his name. Just a guy who cared." Keanu finished his coffee and walked out into the morning light, the city waking around him. He didn't feel like a hero, just a guy who couldn't look away. The Underground wasn't finished, not by a long shot, but he cracked it open, let some light in. For now, that was enough.